Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sending immense greetings and salutations upon the final Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. We find that the Muslim is always seeking an opportunity or a time to amend or to change themselves. And even before a Muslim, that we find, even non-Muslims, the wider society around us, they all seek a moment inside their life, whether it be after they get married, or they gain a new job, or they gain certain achievements that they want, for them to begin to reflect about their life, to amend their ways, whether it be the beginning of a new year. In the Gregorian calendar we find they make these resolutions about changing themselves and becoming better individuals. And you study the resolutions of non-Muslims, the top 10 resolutions that you find, you think that these are Muslims, Islamic individuals wanting to give up drink, smoking, to be good to family members, to take care of one's children, one's neighbors, to be honest, to be trustworthy, to give up smoking. The list is endless. This is a list of non-Muslims. So it shows a key element that the human being, all of us, we share a yearning desire to become better individuals, to amend ourselves. The only difference that could exist is that our amendment is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to become better individuals in front of the Creator, to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as some of us may choose after performance of Hajj to become better individuals, or maybe some of us after Arba'in, the age of wisdom of 40, or some of us beyond that, maybe at the age of 50 or 60, think that maybe I've enjoyed my life, I've done everything I wanted to do inside my life, and now it's time to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to rectify myself, to become a better individual. And unfortunately for masses of our youth, some of them don't even have that aspiration. Some of them continue inside their life, thinking that forever I'll be young, that death will never catch up to me, life will never catch up to me, I do whatever I want to do, and at some moment in my life I will then repent, when I think it's befitting, when I think it's right to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this manhaj, this methodology, has been documented inside the Quran, of doing the evil that we want to do, and then after that we begin to repent, or begin to reflect. Inside Surah Yusuf alayhi salam, the 12th chapter of the Quran, speaking about the brethren of Yusuf treachery to deceive him or trying to harm him, then they said, وَتَكُونُ مِن بَعْدِهِ قَوْمًا صَالِحِينَ. We're going to do this evil action. First he suggested maybe to kill him or to put him inside the well. Then after this evil action, وَتَكُونُ مِن بَعْدِهِ قَوْمًا صَالِحِينَ. Then after this action we'll become pious individuals, we'll become righteous individuals. This is what shows the uniqueness of the Quran. That is hinting that this is the manhaj, the methodology of human beings. That let me enjoy my life, let me do whatever I want to do, and then at some moment I'll then become a righteous individual. وَقْتُ tabdeel, a time of change, or the thought of change exists in all of us. And there is obviously a prime opportunity. That prime opportunity is this blessed month of Ramadan. If there is an opportunity of trying to change oneself, or trying to become a better individual, then it is this month. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change the state of this Muslim ummah, doesn't change the state of the affair that we live in. And some of us may dream about that. Even that dream is an accurate dream, but it's only a dream, because Allah has laid out a sunnah. There's a sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sunnah al-kawniyah, sunnah that exists in the heavens, around the earth, of how the rain comes into existence, life, death, plants, vegetation, animals, human beings, the wind, the thunder. That is sunnah al-kawniyah. There is certain causes, certain reasons that bring about certain effect that exists upon this earth. There is sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed upon this earth, that things just don't change with a blinking of an eye. Person needs to do something, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in tansurullaha yansurkum wa yuthabbit aqdamakum. Allah mentions, oh, you believe, in tansurullah. If you aid, you give victory, you help Allah. Allah doesn't need our help. But the key element here is one of telling us to do something, to gain something from Allah. In tansurullah yansurkum. You help the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will give you victory, will aid you, make you victorious. وَيُثَبِّتْ أَقْدَامَكُمْ, and make your feet to become firm, grounded on the earth, or grounded inside your belief, your conviction. This is sunnah inside the Quran, sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's Allah mentioned, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah will never change the condition of a people until they don't change their own condition, their own state. That's how simple life is. That's how simple the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. We don't need dissertations and doctrines and texts and long researches and long speeches. Just one ayah inside the Quran. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ, inside Surah Al-Ra'd, the 13th chapter, the Surah of thunder, lightning, and the beginning of the Surah. Until we don't change our own condition, we as Muslims, we can conclude ourselves what our life is, what our actions are, what we're doing. From a small mini scale to a maximum scale, we can visualize it. We don't need to worry about the rest of the world. We can just worry about our own self, myself, my own commitment, my own life, my own discrepancies, my own downfalls, my own sins, my own mistakes, my own weaknesses. Because it's a ripple effect. It's just a reflection of everything around us. Why this Muslim ummah is suffering. Another passage inside the Quran, Allah mentioned, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَمْ يَكُنْ مُغَيِّرًا نِعْمَةً أَنْعَمْهَا لَقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. And Allah will never change the ni'mah, the blessings He bestows upon a nation, upon a people. He doesn't remove them. He doesn't take them away. He doesn't lift them. The only time Allah takes them away is حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. When we change our own state, when we change our commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah lifts up the ni'am, lifts up the blessings, takes them away. Blessings of peace, tranquility, Quran, Sunnah. What happens begins to diminish. Because why? We turn away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't become like those individuals who have forgotten Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Then they forget their own selves. Those are the fasiqun, rebellious individuals. That you find throughout the Quran speaking about forgetting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, losing devotion, commitment towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a downfall of this blessed Muslim ummah that we find. Likewise we find the effort to change. وَإِن تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيَّ بِشِبْرٍ تَقَرَّبْتُ إِلَيْهِ ذِرَاعًا وَإِن تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيْهِ ذِرَاعًا تَقَرَّبْتُ إِلَيْهِ بَاءً وَإِنْ أَتَانِي يَمْشِي أَتَيْتُهُ هَرْوَلَةً. If a person comes to Allah and takes one small step, Allah takes a larger step towards that individual. Person comes in arm's length, Allah comes with both hands stretched out towards that individual. وَإِنْ أَتَانِي يَمْشِي أَتَيْتُهُ هَرْوَلَةً. He comes to me walking, I come to him at great speed. What does hadith mean? The hadith, just in small, easy terms, is steps of change. You become positive inside your life to go towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will facilitate your life. Allah will make it easy for you to do the things that you're doing inside your life. Allah makes ibadat, worship, to be easy, just like drinking sips of water. As you find for some people, some of us it becomes difficult. As-salah again, Fajr again, Isha again, Taraweeh again, Siyam again, fasting again, Eid again, 5 Jummahs possibly in Ramadan. That's what some of us mentality is a complaining mentality for some of us, unfortunately. But for the believers, they find tranquility, they find peace, they find another moment, another opportunity for them to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to strengthen their iman, to come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the ulama mentioned signs of Ramadan being blessed for an individual. That ibadah becomes tranquil, becomes easy, becomes lenient. And also after Ramadan, the person continues, maybe not reaching the same levels inside Ramadan, but maybe doing something equivalent to that. That their persistence in obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why some of us, we say that at least read a juz of the Quran, one chapter of the Quran.
that equals to 30 or 29 days, completed the whole Quran. That's the least. But many of the ulama say that should be normal practice. That should be a daily, if I can use the word daily ritual, a daily practice. Every single day you read a juz of the Quran. And in Ramadan, it goes beyond that, 3 juz. 3 chapters in the Quran, 5 juz, 10 juz. That's why when you read some of the works of the ulama, the salaf that you find, so we can't comprehend it. How did an alim, how did a scholar complete the whole Quran in one night? That doesn't make sense. How did he read it in 2 nights, in 3 nights? How did, if I'm not mistaken, Imam Malik complete 60 Qurans in the month of Ramadan? How did he do that? Awalan, you find barakah, blessings inside their time. You find hatta some of the ulama, you find even in the previous years, before Yawm al-Jum'ah, before the Imam, the Khatib will come to give the khutbah. They would come early and they would sit there. By the time the Imam stepped on the first step, they would have completed not Surah Al-Kahf, they would have completed the whole Quran. The whole Quran, sitting there while they're waiting for the Imam to come, they've completed reading the whole Quran. And one of the sheikhs, he said while he was flying to some place, maybe New York or somewhere in America, he said that on that flight, where many of us may be doing what? Frivolous, wasting our time, whatever it may be, completed the whole recitation of the Quran. The whole Quran completed on his journey. By the time he landed, he completed reciting the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases their barakah, increases them in doing good actions that we can't imagine. That we think it's a dream world. That how did a person manage to do that inside their life? How do they manage to do all these things? It's barakah fi awqatihim, blessings inside their time, because of their commitment and devotion towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's we find that what will change bring? Because psychologically, that's what we need to understand. Many Muslims today living in this world of psychology that we find, that we're brainwashed by certain things. It has a great impact. All the Western element around it has a great impact on our youth, on many of us Muslims. That everything becomes the use of the mind, the intellect. That psychologically, what is the benefit of me changing in my life? What is the benefit of me becoming a good Muslim? I can't physically see that in my life. I can physically see that when I exert myself in my work, in my career, in my family, with the people around me, I can see a benefit. I can see some worldly benefits given to me. So what do you promise? What does the Quran promise that's going to be given? Well, let us enter into the Quran psychologically. What does the Quran promise for people who change? For people who believe? For people who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَىٰ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلَكِنْ كَذَّبُوا. Allah mentions that Surah Al-A'raf. If only the people of village they believed and they had the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. We would rip open the heavens and the earth for them. That's the first thing. Blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person changes, Allah expands, opens up the heavens and the earth for that individual that we find. Second, we find peace and tranquility. وَلَيُبَدِّلَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ خَوْفِهِمْ أَمْنًا. You find inside Surah An-Nur, highlights inside it what is the key ingredient. That what will Allah do? That Allah will change. The key word is change. وَلَيُبَدِّلَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ خَوْفِهِمْ أَمْنًا. Will change their state of fear into a state of peace and tranquility. If you take Surah Quraysh, this small surah, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. Surah Quraysh, speaking about the tribe of Quraysh. Simple message. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. Let them worship Rabbul Kaaba. Let them worship the Lord of this house. Let them worship only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What will be given in return? الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ. Who feeds them in a state of hunger, poverty, barren land. Makkah has always been a barren land. But look at the wealth. Look at the wealth, the blessings. When Ibrahim alayhi salam, he prayed, he stood there. That I'm standing in this empty, barren, destitute land. In the Baytik al-Muharram. In your sacred precinct. Standing there. What is the response? The response is what we find today. Billions over time have been coming to that location. Billions of transactions, billions of wealth and commodity that we find. Some of the ulama mention you find fruits and products there that you will find nowhere in the world. But you find them there in the land of Makkah during the season of Hajj. So you find peace, tranquility, will be given to those individuals who change themselves. Likewise, we find an assertion, a positive outlook to life. Look at many of the non-Muslims. Maybe they've excelled, they've achieved things in their life. But sifat al-amma in general, you find they're lost individuals. They don't really know what to do with themselves. There may be a few skillful individuals, but the masses, they don't really know. A Muslim who begins to change has a positive outlook of their life, has a positive commitment inside their life. They know what they're doing inside their life. They're vigilant about their life. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them the dunya and the akhirah. That's all of us, we pray, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا كَسَبُوا وَاللَّهُ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ. Give us good in this world, and give us good in the hereafter, and rescue us from the punishment of the hellfire. Allah gives the good, gives the wealth, gives goodness to these individuals. Likewise, it's at the end of Surah Al-Qasas. Allah mentions, وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ. وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيا. Don't forget your share of this dunya. Ulama tafsir have dissected this verse to discuss what is وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيا. أَمَّا الْأَعْمَالُ الصَّالِحَةِ, which is a deeper meaning. Don't forget to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you find the general meaning. Because the discussion here is regarding Qarun, the friend, the family relative of Musa alayhi salam, the wealth that had been given. And he was boasting about his wealth. Imam al-Suyuti in his tafsir, al-Durr al-Manthur, mentions about the bighal, about the donkeys. That the amount of donkeys are just carrying the treasures. Hatta qil 70 donkeys are carrying the treasures. But the Quran hints towards this. You find Usba in the Arabic language means ma fawqa ashara, above 12. Yusuf and his brothers that we find here as well. Here Allah mentions Usba, that the keys of the treasures that belong to Qarun are carried by 10 strong individuals. That's just the keys. Tasawwur, imagine the treasure given to Qarun. So this is the context of Surah Al-Qasas that we find the end. So here Allah mentions the end, وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. Don't forget your fair share of the world, taking the things of the dunya that you need. And then comes the reminder for the believer, وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ. Show goodness to people, like Allah showed goodness to you. This is the wealth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gives to whomever He wants. I want you to spread that wealth. Give that wealth to other individuals to show the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, you find it makes you mention a better individual. And all of us, we have a feeling for change. Maybe it may be to adorn ourselves more with the Sunnah. Maybe we were to dress more like a Muslim, to behave more like a Muslim. For Muslims is to wear hijab. All these things, external things, we don't hold our Islam on them. We don't pinpoint on a person that, you don't have a beard, you're not a good Muslim. But these are good symbols that I'm sure all of us as Muslims, in our love and our devotion to the Prophet ﷺ, we want to do that. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. We all want to do that. When we read about his life, read about his seerah, we want to emulate him, we want to copy him. We don't say that's the all end, and we just judge people upon that. We encourage ourselves, encourage them, but the deeper element of our life. Maybe it might be, I need to learn more Quran. I need to be more vigilant on my prayers. I need to read more Sunnah, more nawafil, or maybe even more deeper than that. Inner elements within our heart and our mind. Maybe I need to remove the anger from myself, the frustration, my bad characteristics, my bad behavior, my bad speech. That's what some of us, we lose that. Some of us, we can adorn ourselves to be the right personality, right individual. But when we engage with people, that's why they say, most times they say, if you want to know about a person, ask their family members. Ask them how they behave, how they conduct themselves. They're in their home. Do they swear? Do they foul mouth? Do they backbite? Do they get angry? Do they blame? Do they slander? Do they curse? If that's us, then we need to question ourselves. That we need to change. Because this is also the pinnacle element of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that many of us are beginning to forget. That we home in. And it's quite sad that we have to mention this. That sometimes even hatta fi salatina, even as salah, we're worried about the person next to us. We're worried about where did they place their hands, how did they pray, how did they move, how did they do this. And we've lost vision. We lost vision of our own salah, our own focus. And as soon as we finish salah, the first thing that we want to do is we want to rectify them. I'm not saying we shouldn't rectify them, but it's become the main theme. That's what our life becomes. The theme just becomes other people. Another person's ibadah. There could be immense ikhlas inside their heart and their devotion. They may have slipped. They may have erred. They may have forgotten. There may be no one's taught them the sunnah. It may be that. So a person needs to use some wisdom, some hikmah to remind them and encourage them. That may be another moment to build a relationship. That, you come early for salah, you do everything, but maybe you miss this, maybe you need to do that. This is how we encourage ourselves, a love of change. Not a love of pushing people away. It's sad that there are people who get pushed away. They get pushed away from Islam. This person, it's sad to say this, but I've heard this with my own ears. I don't want to see this person. I don't want to meet this person in the masjid. How can that be? How can a person express that about another Muslim? I don't want to meet them in the masjid. I don't want to see them in the masjid. They put me off coming to the masjid. Even though that's not a genuine excuse. No one should put you off from coming from the masjid. But let that not be an excuse for them to use that. That shaitan comes into the heart and their mind and they get pushed away. That's why this month of Ramadan, waqtul tabdeel, encouragement. Encouraging ourselves and people around us to change themselves, to become better individuals. And now is the time to carry out those resolutions. In this blessed month of Ramadan, whereby we find that the doors of Jannah, futihat abwabul Jannah, the doors of Jannah have been opened. The doors of Jahannam have been closed. And the shayateen have been chained, have been locked away. So as we began, you want to change. This is the ideal opportunity. A month of mercy, of forgiveness. Some people want to mention this narration, that in the beginning that you find, it is rahmah. In the end you find is maghfirah. And in the middle is maghfirah, and you find is deliverance from the fire. This narration, this wording, is not a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. They are weak narrations. They're not authentic. The meaning may be true. Actually the meaning is more opposite to that. The whole month is rahmah. The whole month is maghfirah. The whole month is itqun min an-nar. The whole month is delivering from the fire. The whole month is that. And that's what we need to worry about our life. Just like the world. We make sure that we do an accurate deed. We make sure we do everything exactly we want to do it. But when it comes to Islam, whatever goes, mashihal, whatever people do, let us just do that. It's a cultural practice. People are doing that, let me just do that. No. Don't become cultural in your mind. Become as a single identity individual. I strive in everything in this world. Let me strive to learn my deen. Let me strive to better myself. Let me strive to become closer to Allah. This excuse that I can't change. As we began with as a human being psychologically, we're always changing. We're always revolving. We're always moving one step to another step. We move home to home, country to country, family to family, education to education, work to work, job to job. What do? We take it in our stride. We take it as part of our life. But when it's Islam, we drag our feet. We drag our feet that, no, maybe it's not the time to perform Hajj. Maybe it's not the time to become a better Muslim. Maybe it's not time to do this inside my life. Why? When life has always been a change for the human being. Right from the beginning of inception. The dhulumat, the darknesses of the womb of the mother. We make that change to come out to the nur of this dunya. Then the opposite. The darknesses of the grave to the nur of the akhirah. It's all changed. Even you study the change of the human being. وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا. We created you in stages. Look at the beginning of Surah Al-Hajj, the 22nd chapter, and Surah Al-Mu'minun. Speak about a human being, nutfa, then being nutfa, then being idama, then being covered with blood, alaqa, or flesh of blood that we find, then being a lump of flesh, idaman, then we cover him with bones, we cover him with flesh and veins. ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. Then we make him into a complete mold, a complete human being. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. Human being is the best thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. The best creation of Allah is the human being. That's Allah mentioned. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We gave so much dignity, rank, prestige, nobility, honor to the children of Adam. We took them over the oceans. We take them over the land. And we gave them a marked preference. This human being, us, al-bashar, al-insan. But at the same time, we created a human in the best form. ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. Then how can the human being become the lowest of the low? How can a human being the best creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, become the lowest of the low? Via al-ma'asi, al-dhunub, disobedience, rejection, sins, vices, leads the individual to be removed from becoming the best of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to becoming the worst of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And thus we find that it's a concept of change that we find. That we need to encourage ourselves and the Muslim brothers and sisters around us that the benefits of change in this month of Ramadan is a month of mercy. You find inside the Quran, كَتَبَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرَّحْمَةِ. Allah has written it down upon Himself to be merciful. You know, this is the month whereby you swing towards the mercy of Allah. That's why a person who dies in the month of Ramadan, in general, it's a good sign. It's a good sign because you find that the person leaving his dunya in the month of Ramadan, Allah will judge them. But it's a good sign, just like passing away on the night of Yawmul Jum'ah. It doesn't guarantee paradise. Let us be clear about that, because some people think that dying on a Friday night is definite paradise for the individual. It's a good sign. To die in Ramadan is a good sign, because the person is trying to focus towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To die in the state of Hajj is an even greater sign, because people who die in Hajj, they're buried in the ihram, and they'll be resurrected in the day of judgment making the talbiyah. So everyone will visualize them in a state of Hajj, in a state of ihram, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are signs, symbols that Allah places on the earth when people are trying to change themselves. In the same surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, كَتَبَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرَّحْمَةِ. Your Lord has written it down upon Himself to be merciful. Another place in the Quran, إِنَّ رَحْمَةَ اللَّهِ قَرِيبٌ مِنَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Indeed, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is close, not to the believers, not to the Muslims, towards who? Al-Muhsineen, the doers of good, people who are excelling. Does you find that Islam is just a basic element? Deep in that is the mu'min, the believer. Deep in that is the muhsin. Does you find by default every single muhsin is a mu'min, is a Muslim. But not every Muslim becomes a pure mu'min and never becomes a pure muhsin. So you have to come into the inner circle. Most of us just want to be in the outer circle. I'm just a Muslim. I'm just a Muslim by default. I just Muslim what everybody does. Everybody now is fasting the month of Ramadan. Everybody is doing it. So may as well go with the status quo. Whatever everybody is doing, I just participate with them. So I don't feel strange. I don't look out of place. No, that's not the reason of Ramadan. The reason of Ramadan isn't just to lose weight or to just for health purposes. That hadith is very weak. That to fasting is good for your health. It's very weak. It's false. But there is an element of truth that fasting is good for the body, good for the individual. Fasting isn't just about remembering the poor people as well. That is an element of fasting. The core element of fasting is لَعْلَكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. You may gain piety, devotion, commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قَالَ عَذَابِي أُصِيبُ رَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. My punishment will come upon whomever I decree it to come upon. There's a punishment of Allah that exists. Person falls short, could be punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise you find وَرَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. And my mercy has encompassed everything. In a hadith Qudsi that we find لَمَّا قَدَّ اللَّهُ الْخَلْقِ. When Allah decreed the creation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala كتب في كتابه على نفسه أن رحمتي يغلب غضبي أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Wrote in a book that it kept with him فهو موضوع عنده, that indeed my mercy will overcome my anger. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful. Merciful to whom? Merciful towards the believers. Merciful towards, there's a general mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of creation. The mercy that exists, hatta al-bahaim, hatta even you find the animals, for the cattle is a mercy that exists there. But the real mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is for the Muslims. It's for this Muslim ummah. It's for us. And we should be snatching at that mercy. We should be hastening towards that mercy. Rushing to gain the mercy, the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise you find that in that change, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do to these individuals? فَأُولَٰئِكَ يُبَدِّلُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ حَسَنَاتٍ. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. When people are making you study this ayat in the end of Surah Al-Furqan, talk about all the sins that these people have carried out, or the sins that they shouldn't be carrying out inside their lives, and what's special about these Ibadur Rahman. And even if they do fall short, فَأُولَٰئِكَ يُبَدِّلُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ حَسَنًا. Then in that change, what will happen? Yubaddil, keyword here, tabdeel. Allah will change their bad deeds, their sins, into good deeds. Likewise, you find إِنَّ الْحَسَنَاتِ يُذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ ذَلِكَ ذِكْرَى لِلذَّاكِرِينَ inside Surah Hud. Indeed, good deeds, they blot out, they wipe out. They wipe out good deeds. Indeed, in that is a reminder for the people to take heed from that reminder. If you read the tafsir, this ayah inside Durrul Manthur of Imam Suyuti, he says that you find a man, an individual, a companion, he kissed a woman. And he came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him that, how do I atone myself? What should I do to atone myself? You find these ayat were sent down. Establish the prayer at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, and a part of the night. Look at the way you rectify yourself. It's focus. It's as-salat. Inna as-salata tanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkar. As-salat takes you away from munkar, from evil. If your salah doesn't take you away from evil, al-fahsha, al-fawahish, loosely translated in English language, is sexual promiscuity, lewdness, wickedness, sexual misconduct, bad behavior, bad conduct, bad speech, filth. That's what it is. So if your salah doesn't drag you away, every time you come from salah, you return back from doing exactly the same thing, then there's something deficient about you within yourself and your salah. Because inna salata tanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkar. It drags you away. Every time that you may even think about some evil or doing something wrong, the call of prayer reminds you to come in front of Allah. They're standing in front of Allah. You hear certain ayat inside as-salah. That's why it becomes incumbent upon the ai*immah, that not just in the month of Ramadan, that outside the month of Ramadan, many of them are skillful in the Quran. But why don't they use that skill of the Quran outside of Ramadan to awaken people? This is what many of us that we lack. You find that we may look at a moment how we change ourselves. Maybe some of us will look at a calamity, a struggle or hardship, then that's what made me change my life. Maybe for some of us, we're in love with prison, maybe death of a loved individual, maybe loss of this, and then I changed myself. You know, some people who studying them, and they'll ask that, what made you change in your life? And it's quite amazing. They said the things that changed me in my life, this is the difference between us and the Quran. They said what changed me in my life is I heard a verse of the Quran. I heard a verse of the Quran in Arabic. The person is obviously the fluent Arabic speaking individuals. This is the impact of the Quran. They heard a verse of the Quran and it awoke them. That's what the Quran should do. The Quran should awaken us. When you hear the Quran, you hear ayat of zajar, of punishment, of torture, of adab, chastisement. That this will happen. You hear those ayat of jahim. You hear the imam. Why do you think some of the imam, why do you think they're crying? Why do you think they're weeping? Why do you think before that the Prophet ﷺ, you find that it's a hadith, Sunnah of Abi Dawood, when you stand in prayer, you could hear the boiling of a cauldron, a pot, emanating from his chest. His heart would be weeping. His heart would be crying. That's the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ was the most strongest personality. You find when he went to war, you find the Sahaba said that when the war became so fierce, so ferocious, when blood was spilling everywhere, people being slain and being killed, we felt weakness. You know what we would do? We'd go behind the Prophet ﷺ because he's the most strongest individual. In the Shama'il of Muhammadiyah of Imam Tirmidhi, you find حتى قوة 30 شخص رجل رجال, either strength of 30 men going all the way up to 100 men. That was the Prophet ﷺ. But what would the Quran do to him? Quran would break his chest, break him from within himself. When he said to Abdullah bin Mas'ud, read the Quran, he said, how can I read the Quran? وَقَدْ أُنزِلَ عَلَيْكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Quran has been sent upon you. أُرِيدُ أَنْ أَسْمَعَ مِنْ غَيْرِي. I want to hear from other than myself. I want to marvel at the Quran, recite the Quran, I want to hear the Quran. When he hears the Quran, it comes in the verse inside Surah An-Nisa. How will it be on that day when we bring you as a witness? And bring you a witness to stand over the whole of humanity. You find that the Prophet is making ishara to them that stop there. فَإِذَا نَظَرْتُ إِلَى وَجْهِهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم, looked at his face. فَإِذَا هُوَ يَبْكِي, and he's weeping. He's weeping because he understands the magnitude of this verse in this Quran. How will it be that I come on the day of judgment and I stand as a witness over the whole of humanity? That's what the Quran should do to us. Should awaken us, awaken our life. That's what should change us. The key element is the Quran. Quran will change the individual. Just these individuals had just passed, heard a verse of the Quran, it moved them away from their life. And that's what it should do to us. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولجميع المسلمين فاستغفروا إنه الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. We find the beginning of our fast, as we mentioned, the beginning of our lives, or beginning of everything that we do. قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين. Say our living and our dying and our sacrifice and our prayers are all dedicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا أول المؤمنين ومسلمين. Let me commit myself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that I do inside my life. That's you find al-ikhlas, sincerity. That's you find the first hadith that we find is إنما الأعمال بالنيات. Indeed, actions will be judged by the intention. What does a person intend? What do I intend in these 29, 30 days of fasting? And we mentioned this time and time again. Fuqaha have discussed that if a person made an intention that I will only be a good Muslim for 29, 30 days of Ramadan, and as soon as Ramadan is over, not just an average Muslim, that we will all sin and make mistakes and go back to what we may be doing, but intentionally makes an intention that I'm only going to be specifically good for these 29, 30 days. Then I'll go back to do what I was doing exactly, or maybe more than what I was doing prior to Ramadan. Fuqaha mentioned, فَصِيَامُهُ بَاطِلٌ. Their fasting has been invalidated. You're wasting your time. You're wasting 29, 30 days of your life. If that's your double intention within yourself, and if you had the intention, you to rectify that, I want to change. And you know what will happen after Ramadan? That's all of us. But don't hold that intention. That's what many of the youth, that's the intention, what it is. It's visible. It's not even hidden. It's not something that we can make an excuse. And we all are visualizing. I mentioned it previously as well. We're all visualizing straight after Taraweeh. People are smoking outside the masjid. People are maybe, Allah, we're taking drugs, maybe thinking just before I take my fast, doing everything that they're doing. And they just think it's some lip service. As-siyam has a deeper meaning. Sawmul ayn, sawmul rijl, sawmul yad, sawmul batan. Fasting of the eyes, fasting the hands, fasting the limbs, fasting the body. That's what real fasting is. That's real change that you find. Sawmul udhun, fasting of the ears. To fast is not to listen to music, to listen to haram. All of us, we know these things. You don't need to be a great scholar to understand. All of us, the average Muslim knows that. In the month of Ramadan, you should abstain from it. But what do we find is becoming common practice? That may be something that I'm doing, even for Muslim sisters, what is life for them? To just adorn themselves, the zina, tabarruj that we find. And just a lip service of Islam that we find. Where's the element of change? Maybe men change, they should make opportunities. Advise their family members, encourage them to come to the masjid, encourage them to listen to the Quran, encourage them to refrain. We don't need lavish food every day. We don't need lavish food that all life just revolves around that. That the women will complain that all Ramadan is spent cooking. We don't need that. Restrain yourself, give them an opportunity to rectify their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For Rasul used to wake up his women folk, wake his wives up, encourage them, to get them up for the prayer, to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Final 10 nights of Ramadan, what would he do? Tighten his hair, tighten his lower garment in a state of devotion, commitment, committing himself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we began with change will come, with breaking the quenches, or breaking the desires, breaking that within ourselves. Just like we abstain from food and drink, abstain from these desires. They may be halal, but if you want to be lifted, Muslim ummah has to sacrifice. Make those sacrifices. So this fasting that we find, of various elements that we find, sawmul ayn, to not look at something which is haram, not to visualize something which is haram. Fasting the hand, not to touch something which is haram, take something which is haram. Likewise, fasting of the tongue. And this is where many of us the downfall is. We can't control our tongues in Ramadan. We can't control our tongues. Always complaining. What are we complaining? About the food, the people around us. And may Allah forbid that for some of us complaining about the masjid, about the imam, about the people, about this, about that. It's common practice. Even walking into salah, that the imam is like this, the imam, this is all a lack of understanding of Ramadan. Even the imam, he takes long inside as-salah. By you making that comment, the imam takes long inside Taraweeh. Salatul Taraweeh is a supererogatory prayer. You're supposed to extend the prayer. It's supposed to be a lengthy prayer. Whoever doesn't want to pray it, they're under no obligation. Not that we encourage them to miss it. They're under no obligation. In a third prayer, you can complain. You can come and say to the imam, look, don't lengthen it so much. Read a shorter surah. We have to go back to work. We have other things to do. There's no harm in that. That's a third action. But this month of Ramadan, you have no right. You have no right to talk about the imam. You have no right to say about the imam is taking his time. Why doesn't he rush inside his qira'ah? Why doesn't he hurry up and read faster so we can get home? This is all backbiting. This is all complaining. This is all being ungrateful. As a symbol that we don't want to enjoy ibadah. We don't want to be in a state of servitude, of commitment towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise we find that if the person really gains that level of iman, we find this hadith that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that individual, just like we mentioned a person coming close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if Allah loves an individual, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes what? Becomes the sight by which he visualizes, the hand by which he takes, the legs by which he walks. And if he used to ask me, I will give it to him. And if he used to seek my refuge, then I will give him that refuge. That is for a higher level of a believer. You know, many times I question myself, do I feel that when I pray to Allah that it's given to me? Even though Allah does give, there's no doubt. But do we have that deeper feeling in our heart that if I ask, it's going to be given to me? If I seek refuge and protection, I will be protected. Many of us can conclude our own selves that our inner iman isn't there. And in conclusion, that we find a hadith in the collection of Ibn Khuzaymah that we find that the Prophet ﷺ done a very strange action. He stepped upon the mimbar and he said Ameen 3 times. And the companion said that you done this strange action. You stepped and you said Ameen, then you stepped and you said Ameen, and you stepped and you said Ameen again. They said, what is the interpretation? What is this action that you did? He said, indeed, Jibreel alayhi salam, he came to me. And he said to me that indeed whoever reaches the month of Ramadan and does not have his or her sins forgiven and enters into fire, then may Allah distance that individual. Say Ameen. This is Ameen of condemnation, of cursing. That if you come to the month of Ramadan, you haven't delivered yourself from the fire, you haven't tried to save yourself from the fire, then you may as well, that you find, may Allah distance that individual. Meaning that there's going to be no moment of change for you. This is amongst the rare occasions that the Prophet ﷺ ever prayed against people, against his own Muslim followers. And if we can conclude that linguistically, by saying that whoever comes to the month of Ramadan doesn't have his or her sins forgiven, let them only blame their own self. May Allah distance that individual away, take that individual away, say Ameen, and he said Ameen. So this is change. As we said that shayateen are chained up. Even discussion begins to take place what type of shayateen, but in general, ulama have concluded that elements of haram are weakened. And maybe senior shayateen are chained. You can feel that compassion, that mercy, that goodness is there. If a person doesn't thrive, doesn't take that goodness, doesn't jump on that goodness, doesn't encourage himself to do more goodness, then we can conclude, may Allah forbid, la khayra fihi. There's no goodness in that individual. There's no goodness. No matter what state of individual person may be, even a person could be the most sinful individual, a sensible individual will some moment in their life, as we began with, or in this blessed month of Ramadan, if we try to create or help place a good environment, the environment of the masjid, people come and make it conducive. When they come in the masjid, they feel halal, they feel tranquility, they feel peace, they feel iman, they feel like I want to change. We become a source, a tool of encouraging them. So it becomes goodness. And that's what we should all be, a tool, an instrument of not leading people towards haram, leading people towards doing something wrong. Even if I do something wrong myself as a father, there I want to encourage my children to do that. It's my own weakness. And that's what we should be as practitioners, that we all have weaknesses, but try to find sources of goodness. That imagine somebody in this month of Ramadan who never used to pray, who wasn't punctual on their prayers, and you encouraged them, you spoke to them well, you reminded them, and they became a Muslim who observed their prayers 5 times a day. Imagine your hasanat, imagine your good deeds on that day. when you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine you encourage another individual, Akhi, leave this. Leave smoking. Leave the taking of drugs. Leave this haram relationship with this woman. Walk away from it. Stay away from zina. Stay away from this. Stay away from that. Encourage them in good words. Reminded them. Imagine that khair. Imagine that goodness. These words shouldn't be taken lightly, because unfortunately we find that every other Muslim is involved in these actions. Unfortunately, so we need to become a tool of encouraging them to break away from this pattern that this is an average practice. This should not be an average practice. It should not be an average practice of a Muslim. The average practice of a Muslim is preserving their tongue, preserving their bodily parts, preserving their life, preserving themselves, being a good individual. It's a symbol of a Muslim. It's a symbol of this society you find people thrived on. They know that Muslims are trustworthy individuals, good individuals, pious individuals. Don't do this, don't do that. It's a symbol of us Muslims. We need to uplift once again. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all a blessing, whatever remains of Ramadan. Give us all the tawfiq and ability to rectify our intentions, rectify our actions, exert ourselves in our actions to come towards closer to the final moments of Ramadan, in exerting ourselves to become sincere and good individuals, as we began with, for the benefit of our own self. On the day that we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Inna Allah wa malaikatu yusalluna ala nabi, ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun al mursalin. والحمد لله رب العالمين